Joker is directed by Todd Phillips and stars Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck. This is, of course, based on the famous DC Comics character of the same name, and essentially acts as an origin story of sorts. Arthur Fleck is someone who has gone through some terrible hardships in his life. He has come down to the dumps. Not a day goes by where he doesn't have negative thoughts. In fact, all he has, as he says, are negative thoughts. These are starting to protrude his mind quite a bit recently, and things are getting worse and worse. And eventually, the society that he lives in is just not being able to connect with the fact that he genuinely has something that people are not being able to see. And as he slowly descends more and more into madness, he becomes something which is very different, something terrifying. When it comes to a comic book film, I usually know where to begin and where to end. You can start talking about the things you liked, you can start talking about the things you disliked, and it's easy to process it. When I watched the last big DC film, that being Shazam, the review did go on for like 9 minutes, I believe, but it was still simple to talk about it because you knew what to say. You know, you could talk about, oh, I liked the cast, I liked the music, I liked the visuals, I liked all of that, I love the script. It's easy to talk about those things. With this movie, I find it a little harder. I saw it about a couple of hours ago. On the ride back, by the way, this film was shot pretty much entirely in New York, and there's sequences, including one close to where I live right now, which take place in the movie. And I kept thinking about the film throughout the ride, putting together my thoughts, things that I definitively think should be things that I should say. So in a lot of ways, this review is almost going to be like a processing zone. I'm still going to be putting my thoughts together because I have not quite seen a film like this. It's striking, and it's a lot of other things that critics have said about it so far. If you've heard the words uncomfortable, disturbing, relentless, violent, yes, this film is all those things. It is very, very disturbing and very uncomfortable. There are scenes where you would want the film to just keep going, but the film lingers on some very strange moments, so to say. It tries to make you really connect to some of the more bizarre elements of the film at points, and those can be a bit extreme for some people. The screening invite that I got for this film said, don't bring anyone under the age of 17 to this film. There was an 8-year-old kid in the audience. I think that kid's scarred for a while now, at least. This movie goes to a few dark places, that's all I'll say about that. Let's address the elephant in the room, Joaquin Phoenix. He's gotten a lot of praise from film festivals and critics so far for being really great and probably deserving of a Best Actor Oscar nomination and possible win. And yes, I completely join that club. If he really actually doesn't get an Oscar commendation for this, the Oscars can honestly go to hell. His performance is the best of his career here. This guy is so broken in this film, but the film plays it smartly. It's not asking you to feel sorry or to sympathize with Arthur or the subsequent actions that he undertakes because of all of these things crashing down on him. The film plays that balance out in a very systematic way. It makes you feel bad about certain things happening in his life, but at no point does it condone what he later transforms into. But that's something that's going to be ultimately very subjective, because for some people it might mean the complete opposite. It might actually go for, oh, it's definitely sympathizing with him. And in that way, this film is playing another card very cleverly. The film doesn't give you answers to a lot of questions. It leaves a lot of things in the dark, even as you're seeing them. The playing of realism versus fantasy is very apparent in this film. There are sequences that are genuinely designed in some ways that you might have multiple reactions to them. Even while talking about it after watching the film, my friend and I were discussing it in detail. There were certain sequences where we were trying to figure out, like, that was real, right? That did happen? Or did that not happen? Or are we seeing this through Arthur's perspective? Or are we actually seeing it as this is part of the story? And you have to look back at a lot of the film on second viewing to realize certain things or to look at things a different way. And at the end of that, you can make your interpretation on what you actually think of it. That's something which I think is smart, because when it comes to the Joker, ambiguity has been one of the character's strengths in terms of a description. Very little is known about him. The Killing Joke, probably the most comprehensive in terms of an origin story. You got some things about him, but you never really got more than a few details. Joker in Batman 1989 with Jack Nicholson is probably the one that actually had something a little more attached to it. But that's, again, its own thing. None of those Jokers are to be compared to this one. This is a completely different Joker. Heath Ledger was his own Joker. He was an anarchist. He said escalation was something that was important. Chaos, all it takes is a little push. Jack Nicholson had this entire different thing where everything was a joke and trying to find the laughter in everything. Mark Hamill is a completely different breed of Joker. Hell, if we're going by animation, Zach Galifianakis is a different version of the Joker. It's got a different relationship with Batman established in that version of the story. Even Jared Leto, who, regardless of his very limited screen time, different kind of Joker, from what I could tell at the least. Cesar Romero is a different version of the Joker. There's no such one specific line of the Joker. Every actor has had a different version of this character. And Joaquin Phoenix has a completely different version of the Joker. It's not quite as simple as, it's a failed comedian who is really down on his luck and just decides to go violent. There's a lot of other things to it. It's like once you start to go into the character, there's about 500 layers beneath it which just open up, and you just realize that there's no easy answer for what Arthur eventually becomes in the film. But then again, that is open to interpretation. The film is not asking you to feel like what he does is justified. It's not. What he ends up doing is still horrific. It's still disturbing. And it's still going to make a few people in the audience very squeamish. But that's not what I'm getting at here. I'm talking about Arthur before that. The film, a majority of the film is that build up towards him becoming the Clown Prince of Crime, the guy that we know. And a lot of that has to go to the direction. Todd Phillips has knocked it out of the park with this movie. I had no idea he could do this. Frankly speaking, what he's done here is insane. I mean, I can't see this film twice in a row within a day apart of each other. I actually, there was an opportunity to see it tomorrow, but when someone asked after the screening of this if I was going to try and make that, I said, no, I need at least a day before I see this film again. I might see it again on Thursday. I can't just go in and watch this film again. It's kind of a processing period. It's not an easy film. Even now, although I'm saying some pretty comprehensive stuff on the video, trying to put it together in my head as to where I really stand with this film. I think I stand in a pretty high place with it, if I'm being completely honest with you, but at the same time, there's just so many different variables that are to be considered, that are to be explored. And that's what makes a film like Joker so interesting. It's going to be polarizing for sure, I can tell you that. I can tell you right out the gate, there are going to be people very upset with this film, perhaps. I wouldn't say violently upset, though. There seems to be a lot of reports going on about that. I hope that doesn't happen. That's all I'm going to say. But yes, I can see some people watching this and thinking, really? What's going on here? Just don't have the same kind of thought process that a lot of other people seem to have. This is no masterpiece. This is a pretentious art job by a director who's trying to make something more artsy with this DC Comics character. And that's perfectly fine. If you see it that way, you see it that way. Film is subjective. Just like this whole movie's plot is subjective. Oh boy. But since we are on other things right now, let's talk a little bit about other aspects of the film that I really love. The cinematography, for instance. This is one gorgeous looking film. Probably top 3 cinematography displays of the year. It looks stunning. There are so many different amazing shots in this. And all of them are worth looking at over and over again. There's one shot with Arthur, but I'm not even going to spoil it. I'm not even going to hint at when it is in the movie. That is honestly perfect shot. It's a perfect shot. That's all I'm going to say about that. The film also uses its supporting characters just in the right ways without letting them become too much of a liability. This is Joaquin Phoenix's show from start to finish. There are other characters in the film, of course, Robert De Niro, Zazie Beetz, Francis Conroy, there's so many others. But there's a few top-notch actors who have like mere minutes on screen. And watching that, you might think, that's a top-notch cast that's not really doing much here. But then it's not supposed to. This is supposed to be Arthur's story more than any other story. And I think that's fine. For the roles that the characters do have, though, all of the characters that I mentioned, they do a good job. They serve the purpose of showcasing what each character represents in Arthur's life. Just in the right ways without trying to oversaturate it or to take the spotlight away. I don't think there's a single scene in this movie actually without him. Actually, no, there is no scene in this film without him. He's in every scene of this film. And that's kind of amazing. I mean, that's just an impressive feat in its own regard. He's never off screen. And very few movies have actually managed to do it as well as this one. Oh, and one small thing. The score of this film is composed by the composer of Chernobyl, whose name I think I finally got. It's, okay, I'm gonna try this. Hildur Gudnadottir. This score is amazing. That's all I'm going to say about that. Love it. Such a great score. Why isn't it out yet? Why are things early so that I can't get them in my hands when they need to be in my hands? Movie first, score later. Patience, Sharia. Patience. I think the thing I'm really trying to process in my head, if I'm actually trying to be very honest about this, is I'm trying to see if I have any legitimate flaws with this film. If there's something that I genuinely think is messy, or I think is a mistake, or it needs to be criticized. Frankly, I can't really think of much. Yeah, I guess it's a bit of a familiar plot. You've seen this stuff at a frequency before. American Psycho was the best example that my friend brought up, which is actually a fair example. And yeah, I can see that definitely being something that can be looked at, but it's like when you watched Inside Out, and then you also remember there was an animated film a long time ago called Osmosis Jones. Both films had this thing about being inside the head and like trying to see how the inner workings of a brain are. Except Osmosis Jones did it differently, Inside Out did it differently. And that's what made those two films so unique. Similarly, American Psycho has its own way of tackling this particular story. Joker has its own way of tackling this story. And it does so with a lot of great effect. Okay, since we're still... one other thing. Commentary. We gotta talk about this, because this film is loaded with some very heavy political, social commentary. Not quite sure how that's gonna go with people, especially if that's something you're really focused on in this film. There's a scene with Arthur where he's discussing something regarding society. No, it's not what you think it is. I know you, I see you people, I know what you're thinking. But there's this thing with him, and he's referencing things which you can very easily apply to today's world. And that can be debatable. You can actually not even kind of, you can legitimately have a proper conversation about what this film is tackling, and you can compare it with what's going on today. You can actually do that, and without skipping a beat, honestly, even though this film takes place, like in the 70s, 80s? What was it exactly? Overall, though, putting it together, I love this film. I think that's the conclusion I can come to. I want to say I think this is the best film of the year. But at the same time, I feel like something's stopping me from saying it. But I can say it's one of the best films of the year. I can say that in my eyes it's kind of a perfect film, but I can also say that it's not going to be for everyone. I can also say that this film might actually be derided by a lot of people. I can also say that this film is going to have a lot of divided people. I can say all those things, as I have said multiple times in this review already. But going by just what I thought of it, going by just what I experienced, I personally love this film. I am interested in seeing what people are going to think of it and what debates they're going to have about it going forward. I'm interested to hear them. And if you've seen the film, comment below. I'm interested to hear what you guys thought of it so far. And I think I'm going to give Joker, thoughtfully, maybe, a 10 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Look forward to more reviews very soon. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. I'll see you guys at the movies.